All right, hi folks. I'm Dave Mulligan from PHMSA, so I'm a community liaison out of the Denver office, so the western region. So we have the 12 states from Colorado west, including Alaska and Hawaii is kind of the region I call home. Just going through, it skipped on me. So I wanted to give a little history of the community liaison program within PHMSA, right? The Office of Pipeline Safety. So a while back, we were originally called CATS, right? Community Assistance and Technical Services Program. Formerly CATS manager. Hated that name. So I'm the one that was guilty. I hated explaining what CATS meant and what it took me, forever to do that abbreviation. So back in 2016, the team, we adopted the CL, right? Community liaison. Made sense. We liaison between, all sorts of stakeholders, so it fit. Where this position was created from, or this team was created from, goes back to the 2002. Back then it was PSIA Act, which was the Pipeline Safety Improvement Act. And what they came up with out of that act was, right, Bellingham, integrity management and everything. But they said, okay, how do we interface? We need more public education out there, right, to get the word out there about pipeline safety. Also, damage prevention was becoming big, right, the 811 program. That number across the country. And then also, I don't know why it's moving forward on its own, enhanced stakeholder communication, and then just the assistant permitting process. So that's when we came out with operators, if you find you need to make this repair or explore from this data you got from the pipeline, you got to dig it up within a certain amount of time. Well, permitting agencies, right, weren't that quick, right? You have a 60-day repair and they had to apply for a permit to dig in that area. So we need some kind of mechanism, and that's kind of where that CATS, or Community Liaison Program, came in. We can't override the state, but we can work with them and explain, or whoever's given that permit, why these pipeline companies want to get in there and take a look at, where this came up. It's not forwarded on its own, doesn't it?
Let me just,
Thought it was me.
between slides.
Time to move on.
All right, so we came up with our own mission, right, to be specialized since we're more outward facing. So rather than internal inspectors and everything, we're more out facing to get to the community members, public, stakeholders, whatever you guys want to call it, right? It's all thrown in there. So we came up with a kind of credible stewards of pipeline safety throughout the country. Team members, so I included the other team members up here. There's 10 of us across the country, 2 in each region. From my left, I got Artie, who's in the southern region, Nita, eastern region, and then Sean is central region. And a couple of them are going to go through some examples of how community liaison, right, assisted any stakeholder, landowners, somebody from the public. All right, so roles and responsibilities. I could go on all day, and each one is a corner case, but
That was quick.
yeah, done. So I broke it down into these 6 things. I guess I'll go off on my other computer here, right? So,
Yeah, he can unplug it.
you unplug this? Yeah. Okay, so I'll just say next.
Yeah.
Thank you. So public engagement, of course, I put it up here, right? We're at the Pipeline Safety Trust. First of all, love coming here, love meeting, all the different groups and interaction and questions. So, typically when somebody calls in to us or we get a call from the public, we're the first person that somebody from PHMSA talks to, either this landowner or it could be anyone that's seeking information. So during that call, first of all, they're like, who is PHMSA? And what does this abbreviation stand for? right? So we have to kind of coach them in terms of, you know, what we do, why we're here to help them, and then also, you know, move on to get them the information that they want. So usually a public engagement or public information call comes in, and it's usually, you know, inquiry by phone, it could be email through our regular email system, or it could be during meetings just like this, right? That we're doing something out there, that you approach us and you know, you just need some more information or some current concerns. So that's one of them. Landowners, could be a landowner complaint, could be advocacy groups, or any one of those. I wanted to mention, and FERC did this great, right? So John, if you're out there, so when somebody calls you and they finally get a phone, right, a person on the phone rather than a voicemail, we try not to pass it off saying, you know, that's not part of our job, right? It's not in our regulations, it's not part of it. That's somebody else. We're real good at trying to find that person who took the time to call us to say, here's who you need to call. We built a great database for ourselves that we have contacts with FERC, EPA, other people out there or within the state to kind of give them an avenue. And I think that really helps rather than saying it's not in our wheelhouse. Next going down is kind of our real bread and butter is the outreach program. In this program, right, is where we go out, we do presentations of all, you know, it could be a damage prevention program. It could be meetings like this, presentations on public awareness program also, to kind of do that outreach and go to those different places and, you know, kind of communicate. Moving out of that is regional support. So with us being outward facing, we also want to take that information back, what we're hearing from the public or what kind of engagements we're having to the region team. So our inspectors, we also want to communicate with our inspectors that here's kind of also from their end, how they perform inspections. So if we're talking with people, with the public, we want to be able to understand and talk intellectually about, hey, when our inspectors are out there in the field, what are they doing? How do they do their inspection process? And go through that. Technical assistance is the next one, and this is kind of the calls, and this can be from industry, it can be from other government agencies, state agencies, is about what are your regulations, right? We have this issue, or do you have a regulation on this? How do you interpret this? Where do we find information on that? So that's really coming from, it could be marine damage prevention, pipeline safety regulations, rule updates, our national pipeline mapping system that's out there to the public and to the state resources, and then also take those requirements back and kind of influence change within our organization to get that. Moving next is working groups and committees and teams. This is kind of like API, NACE. NACE has a new name right now.
Yeah.
I always forget that. I always want to go with ACE. INGA, right, NGA, AGA, all those different organizations. It could be those support groups or those industry meetings that we go to when we talk and we communicate with that outside group. Also within our wheelhouse is R&D program. So R&D program is to, we have a lot of grants out there, right? And it gets very confusing to kind of publicize those grants to the right people. So since we're outward facing, we'll take that information, those brochures, to go out there and give them that information. Post-incident support. So when it's a larger incident, I didn't get a chance to watch Chris's presentation, Chris and Kim West's presentation. But if it's a large incident and they need assistance, that's outward facing at that command post, we'll get a call from them that, to go through that and assist them in the field so that their inspectors, their investigators can focus on the pipe and we can focus on assisting the incident command. Next slide.
That works good.
I'm not gonna go through all these, so there's just kind of a same thing, roles and responsibilities. I wanted to throw it up there. Next slide. And then we use stakeholders, right? Stakeholders mean many things. It really is whoever has an interest or concern or anything about these underground regulated pipelines. So it could be somebody in the right of way, it could be somebody across the country that has a concern about them. So wanted to throw that out there. As you can see at the top is public, and then we also have the tribal officials, you know, state and local, kind of within that same federal agency and administration umbrella. So, next slide. So with it, while we're collecting this information, we come out with the top 10 stakeholder concerns, right? So we break this down, we get together as a group throughout the regions. You know, you can see the top 3. 1, abandoned pipelines. We always get questions about, you know, I'm a landowner, I have this pipeline on there, they say it's abandoned, can somebody remove it? And it is very difficult to track down abandoned pipelines. We're very good at 20 years recent, but 40 years ago, extremely difficult. And this has been kind of a concern that some states do it a lot better in their call before you dig program, the 811 program, their abandoned lines, about who owned it last, that pipeline. Right now, if I go back 5 years, I can find that history, but it's those older pipelines that we get questions on. Of course, newer replaced pipelines doing a lot of work, right? They're putting in new construction. That's when it's going to drive a lot of our public inquiries. And then right-of-way issues. A lot of it is maybe farming or putting a building on it. How come I can't put a building on this easement where the federal regulations on there? Hurry up, I see ya. So top 10 stakeholders. Now I'm going to dive into some examples. Next one. So I wanted to bring you with some live examples of how we help. So this is an example, got a call from a landowner or a homeowner, vibration problem, right? This pipeline, you can kind of see the walkway that's right in between the middle of the houses. That's a pipeline corridor for a gas transmission line. They said, hey, it's not all the time. I feel vibration. I can't sleep at night. I don't know if I'm hearing things or what. So actually I went out there and talked with the person, kind of understood their problem. It's amazing what you can do once you feel them face to face. Went down with the pipeline operator, talked to them, had them come out there, and it wasn't happening at that time. They go, but we think we have a cure. They think if we do certain valving, certain times a day or certain demand, it was a reciprocating compressor, they changed that valve, it solved the whole problem. So that was one I was kind of proud of, that it was a quick turnaround, operator is willing to cooperate. Next slide. San Pedro, so about a year ago, this is right at a little over a year ago, right? San Pedro pipeline, this was an offshore pipeline off the coast of Long Beach. I was called out there. I was actually I was just sitting down to watch the Denver Broncos lose. I got called out there. And, Chief Hornaday said it is learn, kind of repeat the same things that went good. And I thought this went good, didn't go perfect. I set up with the command post, our investigators got to investigate. We did normal briefings with the incident command. We give them an update. Their focus is clean up, get it under control. Our focus is pipeline. We wanted that communication going back because when that Coast Guard gets on the mic in front of the media, they get those kind of questions. They want that information to back it up. So we kept them informed. Also, I held regular meetings with the local, state, federal agencies within there and gave them a pipeline update, and they could pass it down to their local communities and that information. But there's always one person or one item where the communication breaks down. And I was at fault at this. It's one of those, you ever send out an email, you have a whole list, And then right when you send it, you're like, oh, I forgot to include this agency or this person or whatever. So you take it back, put it on. Next one you send out, you take the old email list, right, and reply, and you're like, forgot it again. So communication always improved, right? And that's a lesson that I've learned. I think the next slide is Artie.
Thank you, Dave.
Yep.
Sort of following up with some of the examples Dave gave, I'm going to go over an actual example of one that I was involved with, where I actually met the landowner at his property, and Dave mentioned how helpful that is, and it is really helpful. And you get a different perspective when you're out there than when you're just talking about it with the landowner. But before I go over that, landowner issues sort of fall into two categories. One involves the right-of-way and issues with the right-of-way, such as overgrowth, depressions, erosion. I had one example where there was really bad erosion and a lot of the pipeline was actually exposed. And in rural areas along right-of-ways, they're very popular for hunting. And you don't want a hunter hitting an exposed high-pressure pipeline. And the other one involves landowners that have a pipeline on their property or want to move in an area where there's a gas transmission pipeline. And in a case like that, what we do is provide the landowner information. We tell them there's a federal organization, PHMSA, that's tasked with pipeline safety. And I also send them to PIPA's webpage, Pipeline Informed Planning Alliance. They provide really good information to developers, to homeowners, zoning boards, local governments, on how to safely, or just information on developing property near or on a gas transmission pipeline. So once the landowner or the acquirer has all this information, at least they can make a decision how comfortable they feel either buying property or living near a pipeline. So now let me get to the example. If you look at that picture, this was a piece of property in California. And if you're wondering why a southern region, CL, went to California, because it's not the state of California, it's California, Kentucky, the town of California. But this is a photo of the property, and he had depressions on the right-of-way. Beautiful piece of property. He has grandchildren. Grandchildren play on the property, and he was concerned that this was a safety hazard. And PHMSA doesn't have requirements for maintaining right-of-way. We have patrolling requirements, and the operator was pretty much meeting those requirements. So the only other thing I could raise with the operator is this a safety-related condition? Is this a change condition? Could you take a look at it? Could these depressions possibly affect the safety of the pipeline? But anyway, this went on for about 2 years, email conversations, phone conversations with the landowner, and eventually I decided, well, let me go take a look at it. And I'll tell you, when you look at a picture of the property, and I always ask for pictures, you don't get the same view as if you're there in person. Because in person, those depressions are a lot deeper than they look in the photograph. And you can see a little bit of it with that all-terrain vehicle, which he took me around the property in. And he does have a really nice piece of property. But anyway, we did get it resolved. He has the ability, he has the equipment to fill the depressions himself. So we work with the operator. Would you pay this guy to do it? And they finally agreed to pay him to fill in the depressions. I gave him $5,000, so he probably made out pretty good on the deal. But anyway, we did get it resolved. And that's a typical landowner example, and that occurs frequently among all the community liaisons.
Next slide, Nita.
I didn't even need to click it.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anita Raju. I'm Community Liaison in Eastern Region. I had a similar situation as Artie, dealing with geohazards. So geohazards are considered geological conditions capable of causing damage or loss to property or life. Example, landslides, sinkholes, soil erosion caused by wind, ice, snow, plants, water. I received an inquiry from the public about a sinkhole near a pipeline, and they actually attached pictures with it, which did help. I did some preliminary research to identify the pipeline operator and jurisdiction. It did fall under PHMSA jurisdiction. I contacted the operator to let them know if they were not aware that there's sinkholes near the pipeline and requested additional information. Just as Dave had mentioned earlier, we do communicate with the region, so they are aware of certain situations. So I did provide the region with information about the situation, and in this circumstance, the region decided to have an inspector go on site, and also, as already mentioned, it gives a different perspective. Although it was appreciative with the pictures being sent to us, going on site can give a better view and an understanding of the concerns. I updated the Inquirer as appropriate with information. The operator did conduct an evaluation and provided reports to show that there was no immediate threats. The sinkholes were feet away from the actual pipeline, no pipeline exposure. The operator continues to monitor the situation. And also, PHMSA, like already had mentioned, we don't have authority to request an operator to fill in a sinkhole or remediate lane conditions. And also, PHMSA doesn't have authority over easement agreements, which the easement agreement could stipulate the terms and conditions between the landowner and pipeline operator. However, PHMSA has issued advisory bulletins as recent as June 2022 about, and I lost my train of thought, to remind operators of gas, liquid, and supercritical carbon dioxide pipeline facilities of the potential danger, or not danger, damage to pipeline facility caused by earth movement from both landslides and subsidence and variable steep and rugged terrain, and for varied geological conditions and things to consider, and also the reporting requirements such as the safety-related condition, already I mentioned. We do have regulatory regulations like the patrols, surveillance, continuing surveillance program for the operators to ensure that the pipeline is being operated safely and maintained appropriately.
Thanks, Nita. Next slide. So just information on each one of our names, who's in what region, also the state. So the contact information, we just say, go to the PHMSA website, do the search on community liaisons, will pop up, email, phone, will be on that list. So I thought to include that here. Next slide. And then just some public resources, links that we're typically using. Next slide. And look at that, we joined the 21st century. Yeah, we're doing the Twitter. You go on there and do PHMSA. The YouTube. We have some PHMSA videos out there, and then also LinkedIn. So yeah, if you guys want to join the LinkedIn, get the likes out there and everything, you can do that. So I wanted to leave 10 minutes for questions. And we're willing to answer, we'll try and answer a question. If we don't know the answer, we'll get back to you. So, yes.
Mike, please. Mike for the people
Sure.
online.
I'm just curious, how do people know to contact PHMSA, and why are they contacting you rather than the pipeline operator directly?
It could be a number of ways, right? So it could be they've tried to contact the pipeline operator and they didn't get the right answer or what they're looking for. Another one is they would rather talk to maybe a public official first to get their opinion before they go to the pipeline operator. But either way, if we can get them both talking, and usually when we get them both talking or we talk, pipeline operators want to be a good neighbor. It comes down to that, right? So if it's to fix a fence or it's to, maybe move a pipeline marker that's in their way of mowing or things like that, those simple things, it goes a long way, right? It's not worth the battle. It's not worth the battle to say, oh, well, that's not regulatory requirement. So, you know, it comes in many ways. Through our website, it comes in through us. It could be an email, but each one of them is a corner case. Front.
Okay, yes, I've got two questions, try to be quick about it. So NTSB talked about earlier the issue, and like, I think it was dredger had hit a pipeline, and some of the reports they had were like, oh, it was 30 feet from the shore, 600 feet, and like clearly no one knew the actual distance of this pipeline from where they were. And so you mentioned how some landowners are aware that those pipelines exist, but it makes me think that with hundreds of thousands of miles of pipeline, most people still don't know that they have a 40, 50-year-old pipeline around there. So I'm curious, one, how does PHMSA try to address that and make sure people are aware of these 40, 50, 60-year-old pipelines that they may have not paid attention to at all and never heard about when they moved in? And then two, when it comes to the advisory in June or May of this year, obviously it rains a lot of places, not just in Mississippi and causing the issue with the Satarsha pipeline, but how is PHMSA going to move forward to assure the decrease in likelihood of these negative impacts on pipelines, knowing that climate change is enhancing the ridiculousness of some of these storms?
So I wanted to address that first question about the location of pipelines and where they know that. So we do have a national pipeline mapping system out there. And then we also have other requirements, right? So we have a pipeline marker requirement that the pipeline operator has to put above that pipeline with information on how to contact that pipeline operator is another one. Also, before anyone, right, puts a shovel in the ground or moves dirt or grades or anything like that, they call 811, right? And that service is free to anybody that calls. To get out there, they mark where those lines are. Now, the other one, though, on the first one I mentioned, the abandoned pipelines that was abandoned, let's say 40 or 50 years ago, that's a challenge, right? And that's an area where a lot of utilities are running. They're getting better at it, but we're trying to find out, you know, what is the best practices out there on that.
And on the advisory bulletin aspect.
On the advisory bulletin, this was a, you referring to Corpus Christi
The geo,
dredging incident?
Well, it's the geohazards and the Satarsha incident causing the pipeline abandonment, so CO2 pipeline abandonment rupture.
Yeah, so there's a number of things there, right? It can be, typically we go back to the integrity management program and the threats, right, that are out there, right? Does the operator know that there's threats, that there's, you know, that there's some geohazards out there, that, hey, these things have slumped off in the past, right? This is something they're monitoring. So we go back to those rules and we make sure that you know, we put that advisory bulletin out there and we repeat it. Every time we do outreach, right, there's a new advisory bulletin. It could be flooding up in the Pacific Northwest, or it could be, you know, hurricanes down in the southeast. So we try and get that information out there as soon as possible.
Maria Dunn, P66 also. I was surprised a little bit by the order of items on your top 10 list of landowner concerns. And from a company perspective, I would say safety is paramount to us, that we focus a lot on because of the benefits that it can have for operating excellence and mechanical integrity and other things. Can you help us, though, with those top 3 or 4 for us to think about and take back to our peers within our companies, how to bridge that concept that incidents and accidents from a landowner's perspective was number 10, and yet that may be number 1 from perhaps an operator perspective. And anything from your experiences that you think can help us understand what you're hearing so that we can bridge that gap internally.
So if you could go back to slide 7, 1 minute, we got 1 minute. So remember, this will be out there on the website. So I'll go from number 6. So emergency planning and oil spill. A lot of people want to know, hey, can I get invited to an oil spill drill, right, that they're mandated to do for the hazardous liquid pipelines, the oil pipelines out there. Jurisdictional issues. This is one of those, hey, who regulates it? Is it gathering? Is it flow lines, production lines? Or is it, you know, in between offshore platforms? So we do get a lot of those questions, or is it regulated or not? Incident and accidents, and the reason why that's down there is because when a large incident happens, it's on the media, right? So it's out there. It's not really a public inquiry that we're already getting. Usually you're getting more information from the news, right, than we can give you at that time. But that's why, you know, it's low in terms of the calls that we receive in each region, and that's how we rank. So one more?
I live in a rural area. You know, we have like gas gathering lines kind of going through the back of the ranch and everything. And we're also in Texas. We're probably going to get like a lot of CO2 pipelines in the near future. I'm concerned about the CO2 pipelines and also just the fact that most, like the general public, like really doesn't know about potential risks from these pipelines. Would it be within the purview of your office to do some like widespread public education campaigns and training for emergency responders on CO2 potential damage incidents and how to react when those do happen and prevent?
Yeah, so I think that's a great idea. I know we're running out of time, but it's, so right now, if they build a CO2 pipeline and it meets that criteria, right, it's in the liquid form, supercritical, they have to follow the same regulations as a crude oil or petroleum products line, right? They have to do their emergency planning, they have to do their education, public awareness, right, with landowners in anyone in that affected area. But in terms of going out there and doing that additional outreach, and then as our regulations catch up with this new CO2, you know, growth, that's a great idea, and I think we need to look at that.
I mean, as a landowner who has a gathering line on their ranch, like I've never had any training from the company, and so you know, I just doubt that that's taking place at all. We have failures on occasion, but
Yeah, and you know, all these are corner cases. It could be a non-regulated gathering line, right? That's not regulated by PHMSA at that time. So, but yeah, I'll give you my card.
Yeah, let's put you in contact with one of our CEOs and they can work.
Okay, thank you, everyone.